Washington Examiner editorial director Hugo Gurdon. Hugo, good to see you. So she wants to be president, but she just wanted to go through all the running again and the campaign, I guess.
Yeah, she doesn't want to go through it again. She's obviously not very successful. In fact, she's proved herself to be historically unsuccessful as a presidential candidate. There was a joke going around on Twitter this morning that it's the Republicans who are shouting at her to run and the Democrats who are shouting lock her up. They don't want her as their candidate. There must be 20 or so people who are mooted as a candidate, and she's already failed twice. She'd love to be president, but I don't think that either she or her party think that she can win.
What's your take on the midterm elections, Hugo? Now 8 days away. How does it look in terms of both sides from your standpoint?
I think that the Republican majority could increase in the Senate, but I certainly think that the Republicans will hold that. I think the odds are that the Democrats will take the House, and so we'll have a split on Capitol Hill. But, you know, as far as those results are concerned, those might not suit President Trump too badly. It'll mean that he'll still be able to confirm judges in the Senate, and he'll still be able to, at least he'll have a good chance of confirming cabinet members if he needs to replace those.
I think this is a really important point that you're making, because if the Republicans keep the Senate, that's a huge and increase this number of seats in the Senate. That's a huge victory for the president, because right off the bat, he'll probably change attorney generals. He'll get his new AG confirmed, and once he's got a new AG in place, it really doesn't matter if the House is going to be, you know, not doing the investigations that the Republicans were pursuing, like the FBI and the DOJ. You've got a different AG in place. So that's certainly one thing people are talking about. You make the right point. But let's talk about something else, and that is the administration turnover. Politico is reporting that a Trump cabinet exodus will happen after the midterms. Now, we know that the AG is likely to go. The report says in addition to the departure of Nikki Haley, we'll see Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Defense Secretary James Mattis, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, and Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen will leave the administration as well. Your reaction, do you expect this kind of turnover?
Yeah, I think it's very likely that after the midterms there will be a certain cleaning house by the president. Look, his administration has never had the sort of air of stability and sort of permanence about it. I think that it's pretty harrowing, or at least wearing for people to be in this administration. You know, it's a constant state of, I wouldn't say crisis exactly, but nevertheless, there's certainly not peace and settlement here. I think that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the Defense Secretary, Mr. Mattis, leaving. I hadn't heard about Ryan Zinke. Wilbur Ross has done a great deal already in terms of on trade and tariffs, which the president has wanted. So I think there's very likely to see substantial turnover. And, of course, the president wants to put in the cabinet that he goes into the 2020 election with. The final point I'd make on this is that it's perfectly normal after the first 2 years, after the midterms, for administration to change up like this. It's something that's happened with previous presidencies, and I think it's very likely to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one to go would be Jeff Sessions. The president has made no secret of the fact that he's highly disappointed in Jeff Sessions, partly because he recused himself on the Russia probe, and that's why he will get a new attorney general in there. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's closed-door interview was postponed last week, leading to speculation that we may see him questioned in a public hearing. House Judiciary member Congressman John Ratcliffe was on with me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures. Here's what he said about that. Listen to this, Hugo.
You know, a lot of folks were unhappy that that it was going to be so limited in terms of who was going to get access to asking questions.
Right.
That I think that this is more likely going to be a public hearing where more members of Congress will be able to ask some of the questions that I just raised directly to the Deputy Attorney General.
And we should expect that after the midterm, sometime in November, you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's likely to happen in the next week before the midterms,
Right.
but I know that, you know, hopefully the sooner the better.
We'll see. My sources were saying that he has agreed to after November 15th, Hugo. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's very likely that Rod Rosenstein will testify, probably in public. There was some concern that the time allotted for the questioning in private was not going to allow enough questions, and there's an enormous number of questions to ask him. Most notably, the story that was been going around now for several weeks, that he talked about wearing a wire and recording President Trump and using the 25th Amendment to get rid of him. Now, it's said that he was just joking, but we already have, the Congress has already heard testimony from the top lawyer at the FBI that the FBI officials who are listening to Rosenstein didn't take it as a joke. So this is a real scandal, and I'm sure that Congress wants to get to the bottom of it.
Hugo, isn't it interesting that an ex-Army captain won Brazil's presidential election, really perhaps shifting Latin America's largest country to the right? You're seeing this take place in other countries as well, away from the United States. They are comparing him to Donald Trump.
Yeah, there are a lot of comparisons. And he certainly shoots from the lip. He's said a number of rather extraordinary things which have turned a lot of people off. However, I would not say he's very far right any more than his opponent is very far left. Brazil was making a decision after at least a couple of decades of left-wing rule, highly corrupt and ineffective rule from the left, to turn to someone who is sort of Trumpy in his persona. And, you know, they think that what they're going to get is someone who's straight-talking, even if very rough-talking, and that is a very strong comparison with President Trump.
I think that's a really important point that you just made. I agree with that far right, but certainly leaning toward conservative. But, you know, this is the guy who was stabbed during the campaign. Talk about vitriol going on. He was stabbed while he was campaigning, got back on his feet and won the election.
Yeah, he's obviously that kind of attack will actually appeal and produce a sort of sympathy vote. He's been in Congress actually, I think it's 7 terms in a row, so he's not exactly new to people, but he's got good recognition. But you know, when you talk in the way that President Trump does and Mr. Bolsonaro has, and you know, you then get attacked, then people start to sympathize with you.
Yeah, Hugo, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Hugo Gurdon joining us there.